and today with our shiny objects. So we got a couple bows on the table, and we're gonna dice them up, tell everyone about what we got going on them. Rick's is a little cooler than mine, but
give you all the juicy deets on the setup and what we got and why we use it and all that fun stuff. Welcome to the Range Podcast. I'm Ricky Bruley, and with me is Jake Hollywood Iverson. Join us at the Archery Range, where we'll tell stories from the hunt, discuss technical bow shooting tactics and gear, and pick the brains of some of the most successful people to ever shoot a bow. Whether you're about to shoot that X for the win or send an arrow at a trophy buck, this podcast is for you. The Range Podcast is brought to you by Vapor Trail Archery, makers of the best bowstrings money can buy, originators of limb-driven arrow rest technology, and innovators of Stokerized stabilizer systems. Welcome to The Range. I'm Ricky Bruley, and joining me as always is the 8 trips a day to Home Depot, Hollywood.
Was not expecting that.
I usually try to hide that in the script from you, so it's more of a surprise, but... Yeah, tell them why you're taking 8 trips a day to Home Depot.
Well, we're finally moved into the house.
That's awesome.
I've mentioned it a couple times, but yeah, we're in. Been burning the fuel all day, every day.
Burning the fuel all day, every day.
Yeah, just moving. Not a whole lot of projects going on, but just some upkeep, organizing, what I want, putting up, pegboard.
Getting the initial.
The dad stuff.
There you go.
Sending in my rebates to Menards right now, actually.
That's awesome.
Time to cash in, man.
Good job. Yeah, they used to do that 11% like twice a year, and now it just seems like they just do it all year.
All the time. I'm like, I thought it was only through July, and I'm like, I went back there again. I'm like, it's still going. All right, cash it in, man.
Cool. So this is our episode of Shiny Objects. Thank you all for joining us. This is where we talk about what is currently grabbing our attention. What is that shiny object in our lives at this moment? Could be a new piece of gear, a good new read, a song, an upcoming hunting trip, or in Hollywood's case, moving into his new home. In case you've been out of the loop, we are giving Shiny Objects its own episode every other week so that we can provide you, our amazing audience, with weekly content from the range. And hey, we want to hear from you too. So what is your current shiny object? Let us know, and we'd love to share it with the range listeners. You can shoot me an email at rick@vaportrailarchery.com or to Hollywood at wood@vaportrailarchery.com.
Yes, sir. And today, with our shiny objects, they can probably see on camera, we got a couple bows here.
Yes, sir.
Rick's is a little cooler than mine, but I mean, I still like my Nexus, so
I don't know.
Yeah, so we got a couple bows on the table, and we're gonna dice them up. Tell everyone about what we got going on them.
Give you all the juicy deets on the setup and what we got and why we use it and all that fun stuff.
Tell you how bland I am in a way. I should have brought my arrows in here. So I guess I'll jump right into it. I'm running a Prime Nexus 4, so 34 ATA. Got the quad cam going on. I'm kind of doing a show and tell, so nice and close for everyone. Prime Nexus 4. I'm running 28-inch draw. I would usually run a 28.5, like on my target rig, or actually that thing might be 29 right now, but like it a little bit shorter for hunting purposes, I guess. And then that is at 80 pounds.
Tough guy.
Yeah. I was leaving that one out there. I run an 80-pound prime, 28 inches. Couple different arrow setups come with that, but of course the VTX strings. I don't know. You can obviously see it's flow green, and technically that's gunmetal, but it looks like black. And then I've got the M1. Was this the 14? M111.
That's the 11. Yeah.
M111 off the front, and then blurry image over what's connecting to it. And then a nice M18 right out the back. I like running these M1s. Played around with the SS one for a little bit. I liked it, but I was running a little too heavy, doing the spot and stock stuff. So actually this is way lighter. I think I have 1 ounce up front right now. And I've got a stack of, got 6 ounces off the back. nice balance for me. It's a little light still, but running around in the hills, I don't want it too heavy. It gets pretty old holding it that long, and yeah, you can throw it on your back, but ounces are pounds, and pounds are terrible for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of the saying right now.
That works.
But yeah, then I guess if we want to go this far into depth and detail, I got a PXS peep because I'm pretty blind, so I need the glass in there for a verifier to clear up my lens, or not lens, but pins on my HHA Tetra Max Rise. That's a 2-pin, running green and red.
Who makes the peep?
That is Specialty Archery,
Yeah,
PXS peep.
Mm-hmm.
Little spendy, but worth every bit.
Mm-hmm.
I need it on every single bow, so every single one of my bows have the same peep.
Mm-hmm.
No smaller aperture at all. It's just normal PXS with the glass. And then, of course, our Gen 7X is running on this. I've been running that for a couple years now. Played around with it a little bit. Did some trial and error. And that worked out just fine.
What do you mean by
trial and error? I was running the activation cord in different locations.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Played around with the yoke a little bit. Did that for a while. And it works, but
I feel like
not advised.
I feel like you just did that just to grind my gears. Is all.
And Johnny's. Johnny wanted to cut it every time. Yeah. Then what else am I missing? I guess I got a small upgrade. I put stainless screws in the grip.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did that because I don't like the rust.
Yeah.
I don't think I've done it to the burger bolt yet, but generally I like to run stainless on it just to keep it rust free for the most part. Yeah, and then arrow setup. Jump into that. Running a 4mm axis. Total arrow weights, I'll have to get that to you, but I think it's like 435-ish. Actually, it might be heavier, but then I do run a FMJ setup. And the 4mm I'm running for like out west, just longer range, lighter arrow. The FMJ setup I'm running for, I would say whitetail, but I'm not messing around during the middle of the season with that. So last year I mainly used it for bear, and then whatever reason, I just use it for turkeys too. So definitely don't need it. But
blast through that turkey, man.
Yeah, 80 pounds and a 530 grain arrow. That's pretty much going to wreck anything and everything. So no worries there. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Ask me a question if I missed something, I guess. That's pretty much it.
So just out of curiosity, and this isn't I know why you do it, and I like it. I would do it too if I had, muscles as big as yours, but 80 pounds. What's your why for that?
I tell every customer I did it because I wanted to. This is basically, that was the main reason. Is just I was like, well, I want to see what it's all about. I want to try it, and 70 was really easy for me. And I played around, talked to my buddy at Matthews about doing it to my Halon, and he's like, well, you're going to void your warranty. I'm like, I know I am. But I ended up ordering this, and Rick had used Prime before. Ears has used Prime before. We have a couple pro staffers that have used it. I'm like, well, let's see what it's about. And yeah, I just said, let's do 80. Worst case, I drop it down to, low 70s, and at least I could have 75. So it's at least, comfortable. And lo and behold, I got this thing, and 80 pulls like my 70 on my certain other bows. And it's smooth. And I guess jumping back a little bit, like tuning wise, it tunes just perfect. Like I guess I might be lucky with this, but I mean, almost every time I just set up dead level, knock level, maybe just a hair high. And then dead center shot, and boom, bullet hole every time through paper. And you and I have talked about it. Paper's not everything, but it's a good start anyway. And then jump out to the range and pull my hair out doing bear shaft tuning for a couple days till it's right. But I do bear shaft tune almost every time. Whether I'm jumping from FMJ to 4mm, I'm bear shaft tuning it every single time. And then once I switch to, I'm also using Black Hornet Magnus broadheads. that's not always constant. I feel like my constant is change, and for broadheads, that's a big one. Like I've jumped around to Grim Reaper. I used Rage way back when, and then and even in those same brands, so like Magnus, I've used the Stinger Buzz Cut. For turkeys, I've used the Black Hornet. And then Grim Reaper, I've used the Hades, the Micro Hybrid, the Fatal Steel. So I jump around a lot, but mainly when I'm bear shafting, once I go throw that Magnus on, it's got a little bit bigger footprint, it's a wider blade. But that flight is the exact same of a field point. It's pretty crazy. Glenn Blair, one of the local pro staff guys, he helped me a lot with bear shaft tuning and going through that. And I just, like, my mind blew when I was actually diving deep into bear shaft tuning. I'm like, this is nuts. It's not, there's no extra crap that happens when you go to shoot your broadhead. Is almost always right there with it. Yeah. So it just kind of cuts out the guesswork, I guess, when you actually dial it down. Then I was going to say the Fatal Steel, or the Fatal, Fatal Steel. With the Fatal Steels, I'm running that for more long range, just to keep the wind drift down, and they still fly almost the exact same as the Black Hornets. So I don't really have to worry. So if I run my 4 mil axis with the Fatal Steel or the Black Hornet, I'm good either way. I am running a Victory outsert on those. I just like a little bit longer shoulder than what Easton gives you. And we get paid well, but I'm not getting paid a house mortgage every time, so I'm not buying titanium outserts. And I own a house now, so I'm not buying titanium outserts. But the Victory ones seem to be working well, and I just like that extra protection, like I said, with just having a longer shoulder on that outsert versus Easton's tiny little nothing outsert. Yeah. So for the most part, that's it. I am running AE Hybrid 26s, 3 fletch, left helical, and that's only a 2 degree. I've kind of just went with 2. I've played around with some harsh, like 4 or 5s, and I've played with 1s, straights, and turns out 2 just seems to fly and jive with me, and that's where I've just been running almost everything the last maybe 3, could be 4 years now. That's, I guess, most of my stuff. I don't think there's anything else I'm missing.
I think you kind of hit it. I think you hit every bit of that. You're using the Pine Ridge quick stand there to hold your bow.
Red, white, and blue. I don't even know if they sell these anymore. It is for sale. I just keep stealing it out of the shop. Yeah. But $14.99 if it is on our website still. But
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. I mean, we just use those for display here in the shop. I used to always have one on me, but I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I could also. I just noticed you have your button. I'm running a Stan SX3, and that's, I guess, what I've ran all the time. I've hunted with hinges before, through ball HT, and then accidentally ended up shooting that turkey with the B3 Mini BT. So that's also a brass hinge. Cool. And that just happened because I reached in my pocket. He was right there. Grabbed out whatever release came first, whatever reason I had both with, and it was the brass hinge, and I'm like, well, we're sending it. So,
thankfully you've been shooting enough where,
Yeah, I mean, I know how to work that release, and yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to do that going in raw, but I've hunted.
You're raw dogging it.
Yeah. I've hunted plenty of times with the hinge before. I've shot deer with it, and it's fine. It's just, I like the extra confidence. Well, 2 things. I like the confidence of the button, a thumb release style, thumb button style release. Just being able to put off a shot if you need, and it's not going to super torque your bow or any, your shot's going to still go straight for the most part. And I'm saying punch in loose terms, but second advantage is deep winter hunts. God, do I love just being able to put it there and just
Yeah.
keep my hands in my muff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm
yeah,
excited about that because this is the first time I've used a thumb button release, and just having the ability to just keep it attached. My biggest fear is that it's probably best that my release is attached to my wrist because then I can't lose it, right?
I was just gonna mention
But
that. Yep.
we'll see how that goes. I'm probably gonna get I'll get the little wrist sling that attaches onto there too,
I was just gonna say, come hunting season, sometimes like a couple years I've played with it where I honestly just tie like a fluorescent pink piece of D-loop cord around it.
Yeah.
So then if it drops, I mean, pink is gonna stand out pretty bright.
Yeah.
But I did have that scare last year with bear hunting where I'm like, oh God, I crawl up the tree and I'm like, I dropped my freaking release. So,
yeah.
I did find it, but that was an hour of a hunt just wasted, looking all over in the trees and whatnot. But yeah, that is kind of a fear. That's the nice thing about the wrist strap. It's always connected. But I know another point for some people is like, well, when you climb your stand, you might hit it, against the metal. But
right,
whatever. I mean,
yeah. So yeah, that's a pretty good rundown. You got a nice setup. Yeah, I still have my prime. I have the Black 5 still, and so that's going to be my backup bow. And mainly just because I wanted to try something new, and I've had a friend who has been kind of hassling me to switch to a PSE for like the last 3 years, and I've resisted, and then finally shot. I think it was. Oh man, I can't remember which one it was now. But last summer I shot
the Evo XF.
It might have been. I
can't
remember. I can't remember which one, but he had 80-pound limbs on it, and I was able to drop back.
Yeah,
without too many problems. I mean, it wasn't like easy, but again, like I usually would struggle, and he has a longer draw length than me too, so that adds to the struggle a little bit. But I was able to get it back, and I was just like, oh man, I'm like, dang it, And then I think I resisted him for another year, and then I was like, all right, let's do it. Mach 34 came out, and I just was like, yeah, I'm thinking about. I was going back and forth between this and the Fortis. And mainly because of price point, I'm like, man, I don't know if I've had carbon bows in the past and I didn't really like them, and because I do kind of like to have a little bit of a heavier bow. But anyway, so before I get too deep into the details on my bow, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll get into the weeds with my new setup. We'll be right back.
New for the 2023 archery season is our brand new online arrow customizer. Build your Victory or Easton arrows with multiple vane options, configurations, and custom arrow wraps in a large array of designs and colors. Spine indexing and expedited build options are also available, so you can get back out in the field and flinging in style. Check out the Vapor Trail Arrow Customizer at www.vaportrailarchery.com/arrow customizer.
And we're back. So Rick, how about you talk about this beautiful green Mach 34? Call it the Hulk.
Yeah, it's it was my wife that helped me inspire the color because I couldn't decide on what I wanted, and green's her favorite color, and so that was an easy choice for her when it came to picking the color that I wanted. And then I originally ordered it in 70 pounds with the S2 cam on it, and then when we were out at the ATA show, I shot it, and I was like, oh boy. It's a more aggressive cam, you know, so it's definitely it's gonna give me better speed, but I just couldn't. I don't know. I didn't really feel comfortable with the draw cycle. It was pretty harsh, and so then my buddy recommended the EC2. So then I made the switch, which kind of delayed the build process on my bow because he had kind of put it on hold until I could shoot him at the ATA show just to make sure. And but eventually, finally got it, and then a lot of our accessories don't really match that green color. So I actually have like a 3-color scheme on it. So I've got the VTX bowstrings on here, and this is bronze, metallic bronze and silver for the strings and cables. And then just so like all my accessories. So I've got the gray DSDs, and then I've got the, this is actually, is it Coyote Brown?
Yep.
On the Gen 7, but it actually matches our bronze string material pretty close. So that color scheme worked out pretty good. And then I actually have the Fire Knock titanium upgrade hardware kit in it.
Wow.
Which makes it even lighter, although I don't know. I've never really been a big proponent of doing that. It's very expensive, and it doesn't. I don't know that it really makes a huge difference. However, Rory really loves the titanium kits, and he was like, "Dude, you got to put one in that bow." And so I was like, he was already ordering a couple sets, so I was like, "Go ahead and order it."
I forgot you did that.
Yeah,
And I don't know, kind of jumping on that. I don't know if you would feel a huge difference with the carbon bow, but like when I threw it in on his phase 4, it felt better. Like it was nice. It's really nice, but yeah, like Rick said, it's pretty pricey.
And the only other downside that I don't like is everything is Torx. You know what I mean? So now I got to have a Torx tool with me also. But other than that, it's really, I like the way it looks. I like the way the stainless looks on it. And I know that it's none of those bolts are going to rust out or anything like that, because I'm not the best at, bringing my bow in every day, from a hunt. It's like you forget, you put it in your case, it's wet, and then you come out and your bolts are all rusty, and there's not much you can do about it, but just roll with it for the season. So the last thing you're going to do is start ripping your bow apart in the middle of the season, right? But
yeah, exactly.
Although I have done that before, which is a huge mistake, because every time I've done it, I'm like, I don't know, trying to chase getting it back to where it was,
right?
And then you finally just accept the fact that it's not going to shoot the way that it was, and you just deal with it and figure it out. But once I get it dialed, because how many hours do we put into really getting them dialed in? I start putting shots through it right away, and then just kind of dial it in as I go. I like to make sure everything's nice and broken in before I mess around with all that.
Right.
And in this particular case too, like, I don't know, I did something to my shoulder last year or whatever, and on top of that, I haven't really been shooting a lot either. So when I first got it at 70 pounds and I was shooting it, I shoot maybe 3 dozen arrows, and then I'm shot. My shoulder's just shot. And I'm also trying to kind of change the way that I draw as well, just because the way that I've drawn my bow for so many years is probably the result of why my shoulder maybe was hurting. And so trying to get better with that. So I dropped it down to 60 for a while and was just shooting in my backyard at 20 yards, just shooting, and so probably got 500 arrows through it or something like that before I really started to kind of even tune it and mess around. Got the Stokerized M114 out front, just like Hollywood does, except mine's kind of the opposite. I've got 6 ounces out front, and then I've got the M18 out back. I just basically took 2 ounces off of here, threw it here, and added 1. Just, I don't know, it made the balance feel better. I don't know if it's the longer axle to axle or what, and probably the different, weight distribution is different because of the carbon.
Yep.
But that seemed to balance it out really nicely. And so now my bow is kind of not, because it was really kicking back with all that. Yeah. And so when I moved that weight, then then that helped. I mean, I could have extended it out to maybe a 14, and then that might have changed that a little bit, or even shortened this up, or just got rid of that. But I like to have that offset, to offset the weight on the other side of the bow from the arrow rest and from the sight. So I like to have the ability to swing that out and offset that weight.
Right.
We've got the John Dudley grip on there, and Again, that was another one of those things where it's like I ordered my UltraView release, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I should get that grip just so I have it, so I can play around with it. And I really like how it does. It kind of helps me index my hand properly. Mm-hmm. It almost acts a little bit like a kisser button would, or to help you anchor your face on the string. It kind of helps with that a little bit, and that's the big reason I really like that. Running the limb driver Gen 7X on there, and run into the top limb, and my activation cord is going to the top limb. Reason being is because with this particular bow, the bottom limb adapter, once you get your center shot figured out, that bottom limb adapter runs into the cable side or the cable guard, and so that has to be removed. So top limb, which isn't a big deal. I don't typically run into any issues anyways. I just like to run to the bottom so that people can see that it's possible.
Right.
Because that is a common request from people.
I was just going to ask, what is the difference or advantage to top limb versus bottom limb? Because I know a lot of guys end up asking me.
Yeah. And I haven't seen any technical reason for that other than that some people with certain accessories like quivers and things like that, they get a little nervous about that cord, the activation cord kind of running into their quiver or whatever. And for the folks that aren't really familiar with limb-driven technology, basically this is a drop-away arrow rest, and there's an activation cord that goes up to the limb, so that when you draw the bow back and the limb flexes, it allows the spring in the arm of the arrow rest to come up and lift your arrow, as opposed to the other way around with like your standard drop away that goes into your cable, where it's there. You're basically relying on a spring to pull the rest out of the way. So in this particular case, it eliminates that. So if you do have an issue with that cord, you can just quick replace it without any, you don't need a bow press or anything like that. You don't have to, split your cable to get the activation cord in there, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a little bit more foolproof.
Right. You don't have to cut your cable.
Right. Yeah. And we've had people goof around like an archery talk and make activation cords out of all kinds of random things like zip ties. We had one guy like pull off a willow branch off of a tree and use that. I mean, your bootlace, whatever.
Yep.
I've never ran into any sort of situation like that. But again, the other advantage too is that with the way that this arrow rest functions, it gives you more arrow support throughout the shot cycle.
Right.
So it's a free floating platform. It's not a solid platform. It kind of floats. So if there's any inconsistency with your arrow or your form or anything like that, the spring that's in that launcher arm will actually kind of correct or kind of cradle the arrow. And so that way it kind of allows the arrow to free float the way that it naturally should. But it also still adds support throughout a majority of the draw cycle. So then that way, once it leaves the bow, now we found that it gives better downrange accuracy. And Vapor Trail originated limb-driven technology.
That's right.
So there's a lot of other companies that use it, but it started with Jared Fondy's original design, and then it was adopted by several other companies after a while. In fact, that design was kind of laughed at in the beginning, and then some people started to notice.
And now look.
The advantages, and so we're doing really well with it. Now we do have a new rest that's called the Integrate 8 and the Integrate 8X, and that rest has an integrated mounting system on it, and these two bows. Well, this bow doesn't have the IMS on it.
Correct.
IMS stands for Integrated Mounting System. This bow does, but currently it's one of the only IMS bows that our arrow rest does not fit on. Like you can mount it on there, but it ends up being really low.
Yep.
And so it's really difficult to tune. I know of a few people that said I didn't have any problems, but when I look at the center shot, when I look at the height, it's really low, and I'd be concerned about getting contact here with your shelf. But some people have made it work, but I'd just choose. We've got other options, and for that very reason, so I've chosen to put the 7X on there, and it was shooting great. I haven't. You had mentioned before about paper tuning and how we're kind of, back when I first started tuning, that was kind of gospel, right? Like it was like if you didn't have a good paper tune, your bow wasn't tuned. And I've kind of come to find out that that's not necessarily the case. It's just one metric, right?
Right.
And it's most certainly a good way to kind of understand how the arrow's coming out of your bow. Does not necessarily mean that your arrows are not going to group.
Right.
And so I was kind of scrambling, right, to get my bow tuned and set up, and I didn't have a perfect bullet hole, I guess, like I would like to see. And I should probably play around with bare shaft tuning like you were as well. But I kind of get to the point where it's like, okay, I've done all the simple things to correct that, and it hasn't corrected the issue. And so now you got to go down a rabbit hole of, shimming and doing all that kind of stuff, which I will do at some point. But when I went out on the range and I was, grouping well at 40, and then went out to rapids and I was grouping well at 60, 70, and 80, it's like, okay, it's good. It's good enough.
It's fine.
Now it wouldn't be good enough for me to shoot an animal out to 80 yards. No way.
You're right.
But I'm just out shooting at foam. And again, it's more, I guess I look at it, if my point of impact is a little bit off at 80 yards, it's probably me more so than it is the bow. But, we'll find out as I continue to tinker and mess around with it. Got the HHA. This is the Optimizer Light Kingpin, which I believe is actually discontinued. I don't think they make that one anymore.
Tetra series pretty much took over all that.
Yeah, and I ordered it right before the Tetra came out. Maybe a month or two. So it was like, oh man. But either way, it's shooting well for me, and I've thought about switching it up to one of the new ones, but it shoots great. I love it. Haven't had a problem. So I just, and that speaks volumes to a company too. If a product like that can withstand the test of time and you don't have to constantly be buying the new one, I think that says something about the products they make.
Right. The big thing that I'll stop and touch on with the Kingpin is the thing that got me started thinking about it. My dad had one, and me running different arrow setups.
Yep.
It's amazing because so the Tetra Max Rise, same thing. You can take this dial off. And so this is for my 4mm axis right now. When I go to run my FMJs, I take it off, throw it back on, I'm set. Obviously that plays with my rest a little bit, switching arrows to that magnitude.
Well, you can do that on this one too.
Right. You're talking the sight tape?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going with. It's like that one has a adjustable sight tape. So you can pop that ring off, you can pop this ring off, and it's just amazing because if you're running different setups that are still similar to where you don't need to move your rest, to Egypt and back, it's amazing. You just take the little dial off, throw the new one on. Cool, I'm ready to rock. So that was my big sell point on that one too.
Yeah, and the big advantage of yours over mine is, well, maybe there's other options that are bigger too, but that you've got the 2 pins, and I've only got one. So there is that feature that's nice. But again, I'm still trying to burn through my Easton injections that are 8 years old or whatever. Yep. So I'm just going to keep shooting those. I haven't seen a need to change every bow that I've gone from one to the other. And who knows with this slight tuning issue that I'm running into, maybe it will require me to go with a new arrow, but we'll see. So since I mentioned it, shooting the Easton Injection 340, and I've got the Dorge 6.22, or not the Dorge, Fire Knock arrow outsert that I'm using, just because when those arrows first came out, you were pigeonholed into shooting deep 6.
6 was the only thing.
And so I don't know if maybe people aren't even familiar with that, but that's when the arrows started to go micro diameter, and they were using that hit insert, which is the insert that goes into the shaft, and then nobody was making a broadhead at that time that would fit into that. And so then they started this deep 6 thing where companies were making a specific broadhead to fit in there. And I was shooting Grim Reaper at the time, and Grim Reaper wasn't making a deep 6. And so, options were using some type of an outsert. And then going back to our buddy Glenn, he was using the arrow outsert from Fire Knock. And so he had suggested that, and that's what I went with, and that's what I've been running with ever since. So yeah, but everything's been shooting really good for the most part. Again, still got a little bit of dialing to do. And, there's a Titanium Archery Products makes a roller guard or cable slide that's titanium, but also that can be adjusted in and out, just like on some of the older PSEs. Yep. Not older, but past years, like last year and the year before. Yeah. Some of the bows others had a movable roller guard there, and this one doesn't. So that might help me with some of that, might help rectify that. So I'm probably going to invest in that and see what I can do about further dialing this bow in. So
What are you running for vanes right now?
Running the AAE Stealth Max.
Oh, yeah.
Right? White 3-inch.
Gotcha.
And I mean, I was shooting, I was using Vane Tech for a really long time. Then started shooting the Flex Fletch SK2. Again, great vanes, but just always trying to play with new stuff. To be honest, the reason I switched over to the AAE is because we have a branded vane through AAE that's got our Vapor Trail logo on it now, which is pretty cool. So of course I want to represent, and they're flying really nicely. And the only downside is there's a little bit of added prep work when it comes to fletching because of the material. But aside from that, they all went on nicely, and I had a dozen arrows when I went out to Total Archery Challenge, and I came back with 8, but like 2 of them have like messed up inserts or outserts that I'm pretty sure I can pull those off and save the arrows, but the other ones are completely trash.
What, do you go out there with 9 or? Rick doesn't miss.
Yeah, well, I think I talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
In our previous shiny objects, but yeah, I had my sight tape was just slightly off that first day, and it took me about halfway through the first course that we went through to kind of figure that out. And it's one of those things. It's really funny too, because as long as I've been doing this, I was just kind of like, I'm just trying not to tinker and fiddle around with my equipment too much. I'm just like, it's probably me. I haven't shot a lot. This release is new. So I had I just had some arrows that just, I had no idea what happened. They just did not hit the target and shattered in the rocks behind. Oops. And then, as I'm shooting, Matt was paying really close attention to where my point of impact was. And I wasn't really paying much attention. I was just like, oh, great, I hit foam. Sweet. I didn't blow up an arrow, And then after a while he goes, well, you've been really consistently hitting kind of low. So, then I started adding a yard, and then, And then he was like, yeah, well, and remember when you get out to longer yardages, you have to kind of incrementally bump that.
It's going to change.
Because, so I was like, of course, what the heck, so then I started adding 2 yards at some of the longer distances, and everything was going well. But yeah.
What peep are you running? I honestly can't really tell over here.
It's just a standard specialty archery peep.
Okay.
Nothing crazy. I can't remember what the
Hunter
technical
peep or something like that?
It's a Hunter peep. I'm pretty sure it's a 3/16. It doesn't have the hood on it or anything like that.
Yeah.
I do actually have a podium peep.
Yeah, you're kind of the one that pushed me toward this one.
Yeah, I have a podium peep somewhere, and I was moving it from one bow to another, and then I'm not sure what happened to it. And then I remember one day I was like fiddling around in my garage, and I found it. And now I don't know what I did with it again. I can't.
It's in the laundry machine.
I can't find it, So, because the one thing I like about that peep is it's longer, right? So if your string is not aligned perfectly, you can't really see through it well. So it makes sure that you've got, because with these it can be off slightly, and you can still see through it okay. But that will change your point of impact. Those
Correct.
shadows and the way that it's kind of strange, but it kind of distorts the image that you're looking at and almost pushes your sight housing over. It's unnoticeable.
Left rights.
But yeah,
you'll start getting some left-right play going on.
So you want to make sure that peep is coming back straight and that you're kind of seeing through it. It's similar to that concept, like Tom Knapp, the late great Benelli exhibition shooter,
shotgun shooter.
Yeah, he originally came out with a fiber optic that you put on the rail of your shotgun, and it was a long tube. And it ensured that if you weren't lined up, if your eye was not lined up down the rib of the barrel, you couldn't see the fiber.
Oh.
So it's kind of a similar concept, right? Where you just increase that tube a little bit, and then so when you bring it up, it forces you to make sure that you're seeing the fiber. And if you can't see the fiber, then you're not shouldering and you're not down on the rib the way you should be. So I guess that's how I look at it anyways. It just ensures that everything's perfectly in line.
Right.
So, And then it's nice too, because now you can put apertures in the back, and then you can put glass in the front.
Yeah, you
Right?
can, and you can put a sunshade on the front if you really need. I don't run that. You can put the different aperture in there, different verifier, clarifier, and I mean it's really easy.
Mhm.
And they've made it even better than what it was before. So you got this little tool with it. You know, it's perfect. Like,
Yeah.
and actually, PXS is actually toolless. You just screw it in, screw it out. It's got a little notch in it.
Yep. That's
to go.
right. You got a little
So-
knurled. It's kind of knurled on the outside, right?
Right.
That's right.
Yep,
Mhm.
mine is right there. Yeah.
Hopefully I can find mine, because I would like to get that back in. But again, most of my shooting this year is gonna be pretty close range.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not gonna be taking too many long shots other than just in my backyard, you know, at foam, or heading out to bunker. Which that just reminded me too. I've got a great idea for a new Friday.
Oh boy.
And it's gonna have to be me and you and maybe somebody else. We'll go out to Rapids or something, and we'll shoot. And we got to do a little filming. We'll have Damon come with us behind the camera, and we're gonna make some Fridays. Fridays are coming back.
Are we bringing the ninja back? The ninja archer?
No. So I will say this: so I came across this page, and it's really funny. It's all golf.
Oh yeah.
But it could apply to archery. And so, yeah, I'm like, all right. So
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Generating some really cool ideas in my head that I think we could pull it off really well. So, yeah. So that's my setup. PSE
Sweet.
Mach 34. Hollywood's shooting the Prime Nexus 80 pounds.
Mhm.
And so those are our setups. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out and let us know what you think. Or I don't know, you can razz us a little bit, or haze us, or
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever you want to say. But these are the setups that we're using, and this is what's working for us right now. So I'd be happy to hear about what you're shooting and why. Feel free to reach out and let us know. So I've come across a interesting topic this week, and it's come up a couple times actually. I have an old friend from high school that just got into archery, and so he's been asking me, you know, what effective range is, you know, when you're shooting a bow. You know, he was asking me what my effective range is, how far I can accurately shoot, and what I think is, you know, ethical, and all those kinds of things. And so we kind of walked through some of that. And he said he's shooting pretty good. His shoulder's pretty rough, so he says he can only shoot like 3 arrows at a time. And so then we went down that. I was like, well, maybe think about, lowering your poundage, all that kind of stuff. But he was saying he's grouping, like a pop can at like 40 yards. And so I was like, well, I would say that's pretty good. That's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
And so I get the Meat Eater newsletter that comes into my email. So, and this actually came from, the Wired to Hunt Weekly. This one was sent out by Tony Peterson. And Tony Peterson is, I respect him big time. Like he's, I'm pretty sure he's local. He's from Minnesota, I believe. But this article that was part of the newsletter they sent out says, I won't shoot past 30 yards with my bow. And so that clickbaited me in, because I was like, oh, this will be interesting. I'll be curious to hear about that. Mm-hmm. And it's written by a gentleman by the name of Tony Hansen. And this is in by no means my intention to slander this or anything. I'm just like curious, because it's bringing up this topic of what's your effective range or whatever. And so he won't shoot past 30 yards. And his main thing is just, you don't know what can happen in between you and that deer, when they're moving and all that kind of stuff. It's different when you're shooting at a stationary object. And he kind of gets into details about, if your bow is this fast and shooting this far, and then the deer can duck your arrow and all those kinds of things. And, using some data, if an arrow is traveling 350 feet per second, my first thing in my head was, well, not many arrows travel that fast.
300 grain arrow.
But then you get into it, and he says most hunting rigs aren't slinging arrows at 350 feet per second. So I'm glad that he said that. But again, he's just using those numbers as an example. And so I respect his thoughts on that. I totally respect that he doesn't want to shoot that anything over 30. And again, it's what are the conditions you're shooting in? What are you hunting? You know what I mean? If you're in a tree stand and you're hunting in the big woods, I mean, yeah,
Right.
you go out west and that changes a little bit. What are your thoughts as far as like, what's your effective range? And then overall, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I guess like that was going to be my number one thing is just, if you're hunting, like you said already, the big woods with whitetail, on average, at least in Minnesota here, where we're hunting, unless you have like a food plot or, even like hunting on the edge of a farm, you're not really going to get a shot at a deer more than, it might be a stretch to say 50 yards. I know there's some parts of my property where I can do 50, but for the most part, it's 40 or less. And isn't there an average out there anyway of, most whitetail are killed at like 18 yards or, 20-ish yards. It's usually 20 yards or under anyway.
I would just say probably a majority of bow hunters aren't shooting out to long distances, mostly probably because they don't have the time or have the wherewithal to practice out that far,
Right.
and again, it's a comfort thing, just like he said. So
I feel like I'm kind of on the more controversial side, but I feel like nowadays it's a little less controversial, just because the efficiencies of arrows, bows, everything else.
Yeah.
I feel like our effective ranges are getting farther, but I feel like effective range is also a loose term where,
Yep.
you were talking earlier where you're not going to be making as far of shots as if you're going out west, and where South Dakota, I'm like, if it's 80 yards, I'm going for it. But that's me because, like Rick was saying, I do practice though, 80 yards or further consistently. Well, asterisk, not this year, not yet, but I still have 2 months to do that. But if you're practicing that much and you are, stacking arrows, and then I think effective range also comes to your confidence. If you're not actually confident that you can always group that arrow or always hit that spot, then you're not effective.
Yeah.
Another part of the effective range for me is looking at what's the kinetic energy you're going to have at that distance, where that wired to hunt, that might be something he was saying in there too, where, I'm looking at, okay, if I'm shooting this far, how much energy am I actually going to have? Where like this thing with my setup, I'm running, I think it's 91.6, kinetic, like foot pounds. So I'm pretty confident with anything there. And that's running about 293, 295. So I feel just fine shooting, maybe not a whitetail at 80 yards, but like last year with muleys is really my first experience being that close. And they are a little, I won't say a lot bigger, but in my eyes, when I'm grouping and practicing a lot at 80, that heart on that mule deer just seems like the size of a, watermelon.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Like this, I could shoot that 80 yards, no problem. So I think it comes back to the shooter ultimately, and I'd say also your setup. If you're shooting like 60 pounds and 26 inches, I'm not going to recommend anyone shooting past, maybe 60 will have enough kinetic. But I guess I'd want to break it down to that level, and then also see, okay, how well are you actually shooting?
Yeah.
And I say I wouldn't do it on a whitetail either, just because at least like it always seems like whitetail are just like they have that sixth sense where they're always jumpy. Where like the mule deer at 80 yards, if you got the wind right and everything else and they're just grazing, dude, they're clueless. And I mean, you have a story about that too, where it's like, if it doesn't know you're there, you can send it. But if you're talking like the rut, I'm probably going to be on more times than not looking at 30 yards or less. I mean, again, I don't have all those shots in my woods. And then if you're doing city hunts, obviously you're not going to be shooting that far anyway. So I guess, I don't know, for me, it comes down to a lot of confidence and what is your setup to make an effective shot or an effective range, and then you're talking like morals and ethics and that sort of thing. But that's where I say I feel it's less controversial these days. I feel like ethics isn't out the window, but the setups are pretty damn, effective these days, where they're efficient.
Yeah.
Where I'm not too worried. Now, if you're starting to play with mechanical stuff, yeah, you might want to know about mechanical broadheads, but that's, again, I don't know.
Mhm.
It's comes back to the bow setup. And if you're running a fixed blade, don't have to worry about opening up.
Right.
It's just going to go through, unless, of course, then you run out of energy to actually punch through a rib. And I'm also saying this, I'm not going for a shoulder. Of course, things can happen. And if you're talking effectiveness at 90 yards with a shoulder, you might be pushing your luck. So
Yeah.
I'm talking like perfect, like lung shot, like double lungs or heart quartering away, something where you can definitely zip in there, maybe break a rib or bounce off a rib, and that's it. No shoulder shots here.
Yeah.
I'm not running a 700 grain arrow.
Yeah.
Y'all know what I mean.
Yeah. It's well said. And I like what you said about it's kind of the answer I was looking for when I asked you why 80 pounds, because when, you can still shoot. Some people might say, well, you increase your poundage. Like if you're going out west, you're going to have a flatter shooting arrow. Maybe it just depends, because now you're increasing your poundage, you're increasing your arrow weight. But again, if you're 90 foot-pounds of kinetic energy coming out of the bow at those further distances, you're going to have more kinetic energy getting out distant. Like you were saying, it's effective range. Again, this is why I'm saying this, because it is subjective. Everybody's has their own version of it, right? And this Tony Hansen here even says, yeah, he's like, I wouldn't consider myself an above average shot with a bow. At a distance of 30 yards or less, I'm not in complete control of where the arrow impacts the deer should I decide to move. And so, again, what's the setup? What are you shooting? What are you practicing? I mean, he's also shooting a QAD here too, so that's a problem for distance shooters. No, he's right-handed. He's shooting a Nexus though here in the picture.
Oh, nice.
And I guess I can't assume that that's Tony Hansen. I guess it could be just some stock footage or something. But, again, so I kind of want to go back to, and this is in favor of this article, because we talked about this before when I shot that mule deer at 92 yards. And I was shooting a lot. I was 20. I was in my, I was in my early 30s. And shooting a ton, practicing a lot, and even then I was still like, I don't know about that, And then my buddy says, dude, you can do it. It's like, okay, well, if I don't, it's either I'm going to hit it and kill it or I'm going to miss clean. You know what I mean? But it's, so I just was like kind of telling myself that in my head, but then I just had to get out of that frame of mind and just go, okay, I'm killing this thing right now.
Winner attitude.
And it happened. But, the thing is so then I kind of got a little complacent, you know what I mean? It really boosted my confidence, you know what I mean? And I'm only really talking about this a lot now because I just, even then when I had it mounted and I brought it up to the archery club, over at Chillicoot, I was a member there at that time, and some of the old school members, were asking questions. Oh, that's great, and had a couple of them kind of, frown about the distance that I shot at it, and I get that, because there's so many factors, right? Just like you're saying. I mean, just the slightest little thing, push my arrow over, and now I'm hitting shoulder or skipping it off the back or something like that, right? So ethically, yeah, I mean, no way would I take that shot now. No chance. But I think, as you kind of gain more experience and as you get better at stalking, now it's less about how far can I shoot it, but how close can I get? And, so when your skills start to get better in that area, there's so much more satisfaction in getting close,
right?
And, drilling them at 20 yards or 15 yards or, whatever it may be. So, because I had since then, actually, I think it was the year before I killed that buck. I wounded one at like 60 something. We didn't find it. Looked for a couple of days, didn't find it. Went back in the spring to try find it, still nothing. And then I think it might have been maybe a year or two after I shot another mule deer buck and wounded that one and never found it. And so then now going back to the whole thing we were talking about with shot IQ and everything like that too, like I don't ever want to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And since those 2 incidents had happened, I've got a pretty good track record. Just making sure that I'm comfortable with the shot. It's not about what is my effective. I mean, I need to know what my effective range is for that particular season. But then now I'm like, okay, I know I need to get closer, or I know that whitetail is not going to come in on the trail that I want, and so I just have to wait it out. I just have to wait for it to get closer. Because the shot, even if it presented itself, you just, especially when you're in the deep woods up here, man, you can't see all the sticks and twigs, and I'm trying to say a combination of sticks and twigs, so tigs.
The ticks.
It's just it's not going to work. And as I was reading through this article, then I get to the bottom, and then there's another one. There's one that Tony wrote, and it says, how far is too far to shoot a deer with a bow? So again, same thing going into that. What's too far, and all those kinds of things. And I guess it's all relative to your ability. But then you also, a lot of people, what they don't think about is, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've run into, like in the metro hunts, where a guy will wound a deer, and then you're like, okay, asking them questions like, okay, what's your setup? What broadhead are you using? What, this, that, and you come to find out that they don't even practice with their broadheads ever, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Did you just say you've never practiced with your broadheads? So again, for the people that are listening, very important, practice with your broadheads, because we started actually for these hunts, we started doing a broadhead test.
That was probably the best thing to ever come about.
And you'd be surprised how many people don't pass the first time around,
right?
And we're shooting from an elevated platform at 20 yards, and guys are in like half a foot off, 6 inches, 8 inches, missing completely. So that's a very important factor that people are practicing with those. That's one big thing, and again, nobody really, I don't think he says it in here, but I've always told guys this too. Like, if you feel like your effective range is 40, you should practice out to 60.
Right.
Or if you plan on taking 60-yard shots, you should practice out to 80 or more, just because I'm a firm believer in the aim small, miss small.
Yep.
The smaller that target is, the tighter you need to hold, and the more you practice at those distances, the better you're going to get, right? Naturally.
Right. Up here, I guess I've had customers I've talked to before as well where, I ask them kind of in the same way, what's your max shot you're taking, and, or what's the farthest you can shoot? 30. I almost just say double it.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot 60 then, a bunch. Because that 30-yard shot, if you think, that's going to be your furthest shot, that thing's going to look just huge. That target's going to look huge to you, where it's like, oh, confidence is through the roof. I've been shooting 60 all summer, and even if you're shooting 80 and the farthest you can shoot is 30 or even 20, oh my God, should be a crack shot. But
chip shot is what we like to call it. It makes those shots a chip shot, right?
Right.
So.
And of course, buck fever might throw some people off, but
yeah, it does.
It's just, I always say the same thing. It's like, what's your farthest, and double it. But obviously it's pretty hard to find 140 yards. So for me, I'm not shooting that far. I think my sight tape goes out to 135. It does have 140, but there's no way with my fletchings I'm going to be shooting my sight housing. So, and I wouldn't shoot that far anyway.
Yeah.
No question. I'm not shooting at a deer and going, yeah, I'll just send it. No, I'm going to try and actually stalk it. And then, I should also clarify, I'm not shooting, across the valley either.
Yeah.
Let's be smart about that one. So, you get some wind drift in there. You're talking about that. And I actually did look up kinetic energy, what it takes for, deer. And they say as low as 25 foot-pounds. Up to 41, but let's call it 45 just to be safe. And then elk, 42 to 65, and big game. So like Cape Buffalo, they say 65 foot-pounds, and this thing's shoving 91, 92. So it's like, yeah, I'm pretty confident out further, along with my practice, I guess. It's a whole bunch of things.
And something that the listener should know too is when you're saying it's 90 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, now that's coming out of the bow or wherever the chronograph was that you that your arrow went
That's
through.
only at X distance.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying, like, if you're at 80 yards, you should also try and find, I think, Pinwheel. I thought I had it saved, and I tried pulling it up. I didn't save it, but I think Pinwheel will actually tell you your kinetic energy at X amount of yards. And so that's why, that's part of knowledge and learning this sport of like, grow your knowledge to boost your confidence. And that would be part of it. Know your kinetic energy at what you're confident at.
Yeah.
If you're confident at 40 yards, know that you're still going to be able to get through it.
Yeah.
Whatever you're shooting. Because otherwise you're just wounding animals, and that is not ethical. So don't do that.
Yeah. You can definitely, there's mathematically figure out what your kinetic energy is going to be out at that distance, because it's basically just a parabola, right? Your arrow flight.
Yep.
And based on speed and all those kinds of things, you can plug that information in, and you can find, it's probably not going to be exact, but it'll, I'm sure it'll be within, a couple foot-pounds, and that's all you really need to know, right? As long as it's at that 30 foot-pounds for a deer, you're going to blow past it, as long as your point of impact is obviously very important. You know what I mean? You hit it right in the shoulder and you're like SOL. But if you put the arrow where it needs to be, it doesn't take much to get through there with a good sharp broadhead.
I can tell you 90 foot-pounds goes through turkey pretty easy. You find that arrow about 30 yards away, stuck in the dirt. Yeah. Whoopsies.
But yeah, I just thought that was kind of a cool topic to discuss, since I saw this article just came into my inbox today, and then was talking to that old friend of mine about effective range and so for me, I don't know if I got into that, but for me right now, with as little as I've been practicing all that kind of stuff, I'm 50 yards is probably going to be my max, and that's got to be like perfect conditions, no wind, wide open shot. I can't be shooting through any brush, none of that. And like you said, of the spots that I hunt, I don't have too many opportunities over 40 yards.
Right.
And I don't really like that 40-yard range anyways.
You another one of those guys that struggle? Well, not struggle, but 40 is a weird one.
Yeah, because I've shot at a few deer in that 40-yard range, and it seems like it's close enough for them to hear your arrow, but far enough away for them to move.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. They can always move. Even at 20 yards, there's no arrow on the market that can beat them ducking. You know what I mean? You're still, your point of you might still hit the deer, but your point of impact is going to be drastically different than where you were aiming. So he even says here in this article that oftentimes he'll aim a little low to compensate for that.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why I don't like to go meh. I don't like to stop the deer, because it puts them on alert. And so I like to, if I possibly can, just wait for them to stop.
Right.
And sometimes you can't, but if they're moving slow enough, you can lead a tiny bit. And what I'm talking like feeding, taking a step, taking a step. I'm not gonna do the old meh thing, because again, boom, head comes up, and now they're looking in your direction. I don't want that. I don't want them to know that I'm there at all. So the buck I shot in 2019, I was lucky enough for him he came into the snortweeds and literally came to the base of my tree, and then was like kind of going around the base of my tree, and then he just stopped and then just stood there forever. And I'm like, and he was on my right side, which isn't my shooting side, so I had to kind of pivot around to get over there, but I had I had plenty of time to quietly swing my body around and get into position and nail him once, and then he took 2 leaps and was still about the same distance. It was only 15 yards.
Jeez.
And he's just standing there, and I'm like, and I can see blood dripping a little bit, but I just was like, okay, it'd be really silly for me not to lace him again. I may as well.
Yeah, I'm 100% a believer in that one. If you got a follow-up shot with a bow, I'm doing it.
Yeah, and if you can get away with it, I'm like sitting there moving, I'm pulling my arrow out, getting it knocked, draw back again, plenty of time, just bury the pin, pull it off. Second arrow went through him, and he just tore out of there.
Yep.
So, and then he got in the woods, piled up, and died with his his antlers tangled in some vines. So it was like, we thought he was still alive. We tracked him an hour later, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's still alive. Or Glenn was like, he's still alive, dude. His head's still up.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? So we waited forever. And then finally it's just like, all right, I'm going to come in from the backside and then we'll see what happens. And then I'm like, he's not moving at all. I'm getting closer. I'm like 20 yards away, still not moving. 15 yards away, still not moving. I'm like,
He's toast.
He's got to be dead.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I should also make a quick mention. People should know their like close yardage.
Yeah.
I was just thinking back on all the deer I've shot, and I'm like, well, I had that one buck. I shot 7 yards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had some close encounters where I'm like, dude, I mean, luckily there I had a 3-pin, and I just ended up pretty much just use all 3 pins at that point when he's 7 yards away. Like, okay, just get away with it. Yeah. And I mean, he was done in 40 yards, but yeah, people should know their close distance too if you're going to be doing spot and stock like I usually do. You might get in there tight.
Yeah, a lot of people might not realize this, but typically your close range shots, like under 10 yards, are going to be somewhere around like your 30 or 40 yard pin actually. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that being is because your arrow is below your sight.
Yep.
And so it doesn't have that opportunity to kind of meet up with your sight pin and within that parabola. So your arrow is actually going to hit lower than your pin. So you got to pull the bow up.
You're at the Vapor Trail Pro Shop during our 3D leagues.
Yeah.
We might do some of those shots.
We might.
I may have already done those. It was fun, though. A lot of people wreck their arrows with it. So
they do those in Redding at the Western Trail Shoot. It's like they have like 9 like butterflies on the bale, and you're like 4 yards away.
Yeah. Use your 50.
And it's crazy how many
Depends on your
people
bow.
miss. And they're just like, they hit super low, and they're like, what the heck happened? And you're like, well,
dial your sight down.
Now you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what else? What else do we got? Is that it?
I think that would probably be it. I really don't know. There's really anything else I could go further. I mean, we could talk about what glue we're using for crying out loud, but I don't know if people care about that.
No, I don't think so.
Please let us know if you do.
Yeah, right. If you
we'll
find
talk
something
about it.
Superior. So,
yeah, I guess this is it here for my bow setup.
All right. Well, folks, you can find us at The Range Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Head over and give us a follow. You can find me at ricky.wayne80 on Instagram and Ricky W. Bruley on Facebook. And where can the folks find you, Hollywood?
Jake Ivy 3 on Instagram. I think I even have a Threads, if that's already or still going.
I think it died already.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Facebook, Jake Hollywood Iverson. And that's it for my socials. But again, please be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Vapor Trail Archery, correct?
Yep.
If you like the video, hit a thumbs up. Hit a thumbs up anyway. Like, subscribe, all that fancy stuff. If you like all things archery, we do it. And with that, we're packing up our bows. We're hitting the range. Peace.
See ya. Have a great day, everybody. Vapor Trail is now offering an exclusive discount to the Range Podcast listeners. Enter promo code TRP15, that's TRP15, at checkout for 15% off VTX bowstrings and Vapor Trail and Stokerized branded t-shirts, hats, and other gear.
Woo! Heard it. Nice shot.
What in the hell went flying? I think he cut the tube at the bottom.